Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the things we know. And today is definitely a topic that Kari and I both know. We've faced a lot in our adult lives, although I guess it comes from our before our adult lives, and that is the birthright to need. It's been something that's been very fascinating to both of us. We've realized how much this idea can shape our relationships and our sense of self. So the birthright
hmm
to need.
Yeah, and just for you know, FYI, like the general overview of that here is like when in our training, we learned a lot about birthrights when, we're learning transformational coaching method, which is based on NLP, and we've talked about that here. There's in developmental psychology, there's what's referred to as birthrights, right? It's like I'm not going to exhaust the list, but we will cover them in more depth in future episodes. But there's like the birthright to exist, the
Mm.
birthright to love and be loved, to be different and still belong, like the right to
Mm.
belong. It's huge. So there's a lot of developmental birthrights, and it's fascinating, and we'll go into them more deeply about like when those kind of get ingrained, like from birth through like age 5, and it's where we form our identity and beliefs. And because we're human, they don't always get met. It doesn't mean that we had bad parents. We have amazing parents, but they pass on their generational stuff to us, and we all kind of learn from that. So there's many birthrights, and we'll definitely get to those.
Yeah, I guess
This
I
one's
want.
about needing because it really kind of affects both of us.
Yeah, no question. And I want to do a little shout out to Robin, who was like, "You should do something on birthrights." And so
Yes,
here is the
definitely.
beginning of this. Okay, so let's talk. And again, I feel like this. I know it because I believe it is my impaired birthright, but I don't know that I can explain it quite as lovely as you can. I feel like we've had the same training, but again, and this is maybe a story I tell myself, but I just feel like you know this stuff better than me. So can you
Well,
explain the birthright of needing versus just wanting something?
sure. I have perseverated on this one a lot because I believe it's mine and Brendan's, and it makes me
Oh,
wonder,
interesting.
like a lot of people in our generation, a lot of Gen X people
Ah, okay.
probably have this, I'm guessing.
Because do
Um,
you think because of us being like latchkey kids?
yeah,
That's a good
self-reliant,
point.
and yeah, really
Huh.
self-reliant.
Okay.
So the birthright to need, I think it goes beyond simple wants. I know it does. It's the right to have your emotional, physical, and mental needs met by those around you. So it's the foundation of trust, connection, and safety. And I'm saying that with laughter, not because those aren't serious things, but because as I'm saying it, our facial expressions are like, yep. Um, for a
Check.
lot of us,
Check.
somewhere along the way, we get the message that needing something is wrong. In my case, it was weak with, the
Mm,
Marine Corps father. So when you need something, you're weak, right? Or it's wrong. And that we should be able to handle everything on our own. And there was probably a lot of reinforcement and value for being easy, like not needing something,
mm,
right?
mm-hmm.
It relates to early child development and how infants rely completely on their caregivers during that critical window between 2 and 6 months old. Now, that doesn't mean our needs weren't met. Like someone didn't change our diaper or anything like that. It means just as like through osmosis and through watching and learning and creating meaning around things, we may have gotten the message that as soon as you can meet your needs on your own, you're golden, you're appreciated, and you're worthy. That doesn't mean that's what was meant to be conveyed, but that can often be conveyed, especially like in those families with lots of kids that were born close together. I know for my husband, we talk about this a lot, like being like right smack dab in the middle of Irish triplets, which means like three boys that were born really close together. The the reference that's often made to him is how easy he was, how he potty trained himself and he put himself to bed. He had an incredibly loving parents. They appreciated how much he didn't need. That
Right.
they didn't mean to say you can't need anything. Of course they were there when he needed something, but he did definitely develop a identity around like I should be easy. Yeah.
I think that's interesting too because it's like logically it doesn't make sense. If you've been praised for not needing much, right? Then you should just think, "Oh, this is great." But when it comes right down to it, that that's how if you've been praised for it, you're like, "Okay, well then I guess I just better never because everybody likes it when I don't need anything." Um
Yeah.
I mean, for me, this is, I think I think I'm going to learn a lot just as we're talking today. I'm not going to lie. I have only recently sort of honed in on this for myself. I'm the oldest, so I don't think it comes from that. But it has been reflected to me over the last several years around like you're always holding everything for everybody else, right? Whether it's as a
Mhm.
mom or as a coach, and I've been asked the question like, who does the coach go to? Who do you go to be held? And obviously in my family, I don't feel this need. Like Darren's great, my kids are amazing. They do step up. If I'm sad, they absolutely come in and do that for me. Um, and I know that one of the things I love so much about being a coach is that when I get to focus on other people,
Mhm.
I don't have to turn inward sometimes if I don't want to. And to tie in human design as a manifester, I talk when I want to talk. To inform is my strategy. If I don't want to, I'm not going to. Um, but in understanding that my birthright, that it feels impaired, is the right to need, then when I go ask for what I need and I am shut down, it is devastating.
Mm. Yeah. It's slightly it's similar and different for me because I'm a projector. I don't have a lot of like, closed centers. So it is just so natural and empathic for me to like meet other people's needs. And
Yeah.
then I was appreciated for that at a really young age. And it was reinforced to that I could just tell what people needed and I could anticipate what people were going to need. And so like I was very aware of needs, but I don't think I knew how to identify and speak to my own,
Mm.
even speak to my own, and then I was either appreciated or sort of overlooked by teachers. Like, well, I didn't think you needed anything. Like I'd want some attention, or I'd think I need some help with something, and they later would be like, and if I ever tried to speak up and ask for something, I was so awkward about it that they would be like, I didn't think you needed anything, or
Yeah,
sorry,
because you weren't used to
and
asking. And when
yeah,
asking for help
yeah,
is hard, to
yes,
do.
totally,
And
totally.
so
And
if
I
you're not
didn't,
used to doing it,
yeah. And it was weird being the youngest. Like I wanted attention. And then when I got it, it was really weird. I didn't know what to do with it because
interesting.
I didn't want any attention for needing anything, right? Because
Hmm.
that felt weak. Um, and yeah, it's interesting. Like, and also, as a little one, you start to assume your value is in what you do, what you accomplish, what you contribute. So I thought, like, if I'm meeting people's needs, if I'm getting good grades, if I can crack an appropriate joke and entertain people, like those are the things, like those were what made me valuable. So it's hard to understand, and I think this is probably true across our generation. It's hard to feel valuable when you don't know what to do and you actually need something. It's
Mm-hmm.
very much like territory where you don't feel like you like like worth comes in there. And
Yes.
it's so much part of what fuels the work you and I are doing is it isn't about what you do, it's about how you be, and loving yourself simply because you exist and knowing that there's value in that wasn't really reinforced.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm still so fascinated on the Gen X piece of this because I think you're exactly right. I mean, we have been lauded as a generation for being able to just hold down the fort, because and again, to go back, I want to ask you about developmental windows here, but before what strikes me is like we weren't latchkey kids because our parents sucked. We were latchkey kids because our moms were stepping into the workforce for the first time. And
Right.
hallelujah, right? There was a lot of divorce in our generation. And so, yeah, our moms were working, our dads were working. Um, it wasn't that our parents didn't love us and yeah, I mean that's one of the things I always found so interesting about birthrights is, and I so distinctly remember hearing this and kind of my mind being blown, that even the worst parents have are doing the best they can and have
Yes.
positive intentions behind what they do, right? So if I look at my mom and dad and them getting a divorce and then my mom going out to work and so now my sister and I are latchkey kids, of course she didn't want that, but she had to take care of the family. And so
Yes.
there's these great intentions, but in some ways that she didn't know she was hurting us and didn't mean to hurt us. We didn't know we were being hurt. Like there was something very cool about like we get to go home by ourselves, like buck up, little soldier. And so
Sure.
that's such a fascinating piece around all of this.
I agree. I also, in addition to that, and it doesn't disagree with that because all of this is true. Like I agree that that was just like what the times were, and we're all really
Yeah,
grateful for how self-reliant we were. Um,
totally.
I I know like who I want to be with in like a lifeboat situation or a deserted island for sure. But I also think patriarchy has a lot to do with it because what
Mm,
we know is like we're in a world now where the emotional IQ is finally valued, where we are like younger generations of men, especially, but men and women, honestly, are learning that emotions aren't the enemy, that emotions are actually our true intelligence, and they're really going to like really help us understand and learn and grow. And I feel like I was raised in a time where like emotions were messy, unprofessional,
mm.
inappropriate, embarrassing, and that like we needed to be thinking beings where like we would push emotions aside or shove them down, as my husband likes to say, where we're now like really embracing much more, and maybe it's the water we swim in, maybe someone could listen to this, we are, but
Hmm.
we're in a place where we're like, let's get messy, that's where the shit really is, let's be emotional and let's let our emotions guide us into a place that's real and help us like celebrate who we are. That was not part of it. So I do think there's something to that because emotions are really trying to indicate needs, and thoughts
Yeah.
are like, you don't need that. Like just I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but for me this is how it went. It was like, I need something. No, you don't, you can figure it out, like this.
Hmm.
My thoughts
Hmm.
would like squash those down
Right.
and completely just lock up my right to need anything.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know. I think that's exactly right. I mean, think about the phrase needy, right?
Right.
When you think
Negative.
about people that are needy, right? And not only is it negative, but they also that usually gets coupled with, they're so emotional, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I have actually uttered the words, I don't ever want to be needy, you know.
Right.
I have
and
literally said that about myself.
and I'm debunking that with my kids all the time. It's like, it's great to be needy. It is human to be needy. We
I
need
know.
to need. And that's how we like really come together in relationship, is to, be vulnerable and say, here's what I need.
Yeah.
And thankfully we're living in a time and doing this kind of work where we're really like, actually, what you need is to express your needs.
Yeah.
That is not how I ever thought growing up. So
No,
yeah.
absolutely not. Okay, so talk about developmental windows. How do they work and how do they relate to the birthrights?
All right. So, as I understand it from our training and from a lot of other studying I've done, it's just developmental learning windows are like stages in childhood when we're really forming our understanding of ourselves, others, in the world.
Mm,
So during those windows, certain needs and beliefs get imprinted on us. That's a word from that we see a lot in neurolinguistic programming and pathways. Um, the birthright to need is just one of many. It's like the birthright to be loved or to belong. This one forms early on, and when we're totally dependent on others, we start to like, you know, realize that we're dependent on others, and for some reason, in a lot of people's development, that starts to break, and you start to realize, oh, I shouldn't need that anymore. Like a lot
mm,
of kind of that kind of thinking comes in. When a baby's needs are constantly met, for example, they learn that it's okay to need things and that others are there to help. But when those needs aren't met or are dismissed at some point in their development, and I love the way it was described to us by Stacey Morgenstern when she trained us. She's like, sometimes like there's definitely trauma that happens that really like also creates um, distorted beliefs about oneself, but sometimes it's super innocent.
yeah.
Like, you know, you might like the birthright to be loved. I love how she would, be like, you were trying to show your mom as you twirl the baton and she took a phone call, and your little young brain was like, she doesn't care, right? But that's
Yeah.
not true. But
Yeah.
sometimes those things can happen. But when a need didn't get met, sometimes that's where it starts to become impaired.
Mm,
And also, it could just be from messaging about like, you're not a baby anymore. Do that for yourself, what do you need me to do this for? Like those kind of things where they were with good intention trying to make you stronger and smarter and more able, could tell you that needing something made you like more like a baby.
Okay, so that
Yeah.
let me stop you if so I guess that was what I was curious about is this could happen when you're a baby and you don't have any words for it, but it could happen at any stage of development. Are there, based on your studies and your learning, are there different times of childhood? Like, is there like I think about growth spurts, right? So are there different little pockets of time that this could happen, or could it just happen anytime?
Absolutely. Like, according to NLP, I would say the birthright to exist is your earliest, sense of that. And because that can happen like from the womb up to 2 months. From like 2 months to 6 months is really where the birthright to need is getting. And I know this is sounding to some people like, what? I don't remember anything from that time. So, this is where like psychology is kind of placing the development and the sense of it. Because as a baby, you can feel your needs getting met, whether you have
Right.
words for it or not. 6 months to 12 months, the birthright to be separate still belong because that's when they're starting to crawl away from people, but they still feel like they're part of you. 1 to 2 years, birthright to take action. We'll go into that. I think that would be a really great episode. 2 to 3 years old, and I think 3 to 5 too. Like the birthright to love and be loved, and that's where you start forming your beliefs about yourself in the world. So yeah, those are the developmental windows in general. Obviously, they can be different for different people, but yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And as you're saying all of them, I'm like, that's right, I did learn all those things.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, is there anything else you wanted to say around developmental windows, or is that nails
No,
it?
I prefer to stay general just because it's not my expertise, and also because I really want to focus on the need thing and our interpretation of it. So if people have questions about it, they can certainly Google it or reach out to us, and I could
Yeah.
send you in that direction.
So again, you're giving this, or we're the way it is shown for developmental windows, it sort of ends around 5, and yet we carry this into adulthood. I mean, I am not, you know this because I've said it to you recently, but like it is crazy to me that I am just now realizing, and I think that's why I'm forgetting so much of this, because I remember when I did the training for this is all flooding back right now. I remember because one of the things I love so much about our training is we would learn a piece and then we would get together with another student and discuss and run through it. And I can remember the skills lab partner I had, like she knew hers. Like it was so very, very clear. And I've always said and still maintain that like, yeah, my parents got divorced when I was in the 7th grade, but for all intents and purposes, everything was fine, you know. Again, so many people were getting divorced back then. I just felt like I was part of it. And so for me to just in recent years recognize that this is impaired for me. I think when I went through the training, I was like, yeah, I'm good, which is why it didn't stick. But now it's so obvious to me. So it's interesting that it's rearing its head for me at 55, for fuck's sake.
I do think everything shows up for you when you're ready for it like, and you know
True.
what I mean? So I felt that way in our training. There was things that landed like this, and there was other things that years later when I was taking a client through it suddenly clicked for me.
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
I think I'm like, oh shoot, I gotta go back to that for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if you don't have, if your birthright to need is impaired, um, what can happen?
Well, this is what we see all the time. I think of people who have we see this so much, especially like the women who just came to our retreat because we're recording this like less than a week after our retreat. And a lot of the people I've coached, either through HCI or my own clients, is we see a lot of people pleasing to an nth
Ah,
degree, right? And it shows up in a lot of ways, like people who became binge eaters or have any sort of addiction, really not the addiction, any sort of numbing, right? That they
yes.
do because they never got their needs met. They never knew, they got so appreciated for who they were, and they may have walked. This is in general, but this is really common. So I don't want to say this is true of everyone, but if you're listening to us, chances are you know more people like this than not, and especially women. But I know men like this too. They got so appreciated for how they showed up in the world. They became the strong one. They became the caregivers. They became the ones who run everything. They become the parents who volunteer and work. Like they're just doing it fucking all, and then they come to us totally burnt out. And when we were health coaching, it was the people that like I can't stop eating, or I can't stop, like I exercise too much, or like they're numbing something because they're doing something to fill a hole that they just can't fill, and they don't even know how to identify it. I'm not saying
Yep.
this perfectly, but I think you know what I'm saying. So
Yep.
that's what happens when you don't nurture and identify the right to need and get a little help with that. Not only does it like end up in a place where you either feel burned out, or you're frozen in perfectionism, or you really just don't know what the fuck you want or who you are anymore because you're taking care of everyone else. Chances are you did not, either get taught or learn to nurture, like, hey, let me stop and take care of me. And you're an interesting case because you're really good at self-care, but there's deeper needs that you're realizing, like, oh, this part's vulnerable for me, and I kind of just never asked for that because I didn't know I needed it. I didn't realize I
Right.
needed it, right? So it's different for different people. Some people don't know. And here's an interesting thing. I had a window to learning this a long time ago. And it was when I was an RA in college, and I realized I was like naturally constantly in these roles where I was like helping other people, right? And I get something out of that too, right? When I
Mhm.
can be the
Oh
one
yeah.
who, like, I can take care of your kids, I can bring you a meal, I can do this. What I realized was, like, I had some sense of, oh, I actually really need to get vulnerable with some peers to feel close to anyone. Otherwise, like it's like it's imbalanced. I had the beginnings of that, and there was a lot of like different stories I could go into of realizing, like, I'm glad people appreciate me, but does anyone know what a mess I also feel like sometimes? And I don't want to be a phony, and that's weird. And so I need
Yeah.
someone to know like where I feel messy. And so like it did, without words for it, did make me figure out how to at least get that need met with friends. Like, I need to know you love me even though I'm a fucking mess, right? But then it wasn't till later when Peter and Griffin were really little and I broke my ankle in 3 places. This is before I ever had Miles. And up until that point, especially because Griffin wasn't walking yet and Peter was taking 4-hour naps, I was like this smug mom who, like, I didn't think I was doing it perfectly, but working part-time, taking care of these kids, and they were they weren't really stretching me at the point because I was like, wow, this one naps this, I can do this. And so I was like, watching other people's kids, and I could still like bring someone a meal if they had a baby. And I remember thinking, like, I think I got this. And when my ankle broke, I was like, oh fuck, I need to
I
get
don't
Griffin
got
to
this.
PT. I need to get me to PT. I don't got this. Like, I was suddenly horizontal and really like grateful that I had all this slow down energy to like see where they were at, like, because I was on the floor with them. But I had asked so many people for help, and that was humbling and it was uncomfortable. And I had to do all kinds of work that I didn't even know I needed yet to like really be okay needing something and not feeling indebted to people or guilty or sorry and all that stuff. Like, all that shit came up. And this is before I became a coach. This is, early on in my previous career. So that was the beginnings of something that made so much sense when I finally came into coach training.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for me, as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, so for me, it's like, I mean, we can have the I'll match you with the hip replacement. Like, obviously, when I got my hip replaced, but I was ready for that. Like, I was prepared for like everything Darren was going to have to be there for, for at least the first 10 days. Like, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't shower without him standing right there because I couldn't put weight on my leg, right? And so I expected that. So I didn't have problems with that. Although when I hit my post-op depression, the intrusive thoughts were all around that. Like, how is he ever going to want me again? He's had to see all this shit, literal and figuratively. So it was interesting how even though I was prepared for it when the depression happened, the intrusive thoughts were around the fact that I
Yeah.
had needed him so much. But then and the thing that just keeps coming up, and I'll find it for the social media, is how often I've seen people put a post or a GIF around check on your strong friends because they need help too. And I think,
Totally.
my sister and I have both at some point in time posted that, we both present um, as strong women,
Hmm.
who've raised strong women. And while I do share on my personal social media, some vulnerability for sure, there is a part of me that always feels guilty when I do, because
Hmm.
I know that it has been, again, this is all the same thing, right? It has been reflected back to me about, like, oh my God, you have this great life and you have this great kids and you have this great husband and look at your career and blah, blah, blah. And so when I go and post something, I have to do it from a place of I'm doing it for the we and not the me mentally. And I will post and be like, there's a little part of my brain that says, people are going to be disappointed that you're not who you say or how you look or how they think you are. I know who I am, but people are going to be
Hmm.
disappointed that sometimes you're sad or sometimes you're not mad. They like when I'm mad, but sometimes you're sad. And then I think, no, post it anyways, because I want people to know that this person that they think is so strong and has it all together has moments like this. So
And and part of what you're posting is for you need support.
exactly. And I get it, I mean, I receive it, and that's and absolutely. But that impaired birthright goes, now I'm being needy. Now I'm letting people down because I'm showing them a vulnerable side,
Right.
and
Yeah.
my brand is to not be that way. Which
Hmm.
I didn't, that's a brand that's been put on me. I didn't make that brand, but um so yeah, that's just all as you're speaking, that's all really like, oh, when I say that's happened in the last couple years, I think that's why. Because I
That's
show up because of who I am and what I do, and how I show up on social media. That's I think where I finally realized that
yeah.
that's where my impaired birthright is.
Yeah. And I don't think this apply. I know this doesn't apply to us, but so many of the people that I've worked with, and I know this is true for you too, have an impaired right to need because they had either a narcissistic parent,
Yeah,
emotionally immature parent, they got parentified really young.
yeah,
There was abuse. And so that is the more obvious way that people become the strong one and they take care of everyone because they literally are walking on eggshells, but they never get their needs met. And
yeah,
so that's worth mentioning. It's just not exactly our stories, but I think the subtle place where it happens too is like when you say like I didn't put that brand on me, like I think I did early on think my brand was I help everyone else. Honestly, like
mm,
I'm supposed to. Said this many times on the pod, like I was raised and taught to like really admire selfless women, And what does that
yeah,
even mean, right? And
yeah,
so I think where the nuances are is like don't be a martyr, right? Like don't do that and then neglect your own needs and do the work, the hard work. Like we know so many women, and I've been there too, who get like when someone actually looks at you and says, what are your hobbies? And you're like, people are like, must be nice. And that's where women get embittered toward each other. But it's really
yeah,
because we haven't grown up with the idea and celebrated enough, like actually getting to know who you are, like what you care about and what you need isn't just vital for every human. It's super vital for you to show up the way you want for the people you love.
yeah,
Because when somebody has an impaired birthright to need, you can't be in full relationship with them if they can't let you meet one of their needs, because like that's how we become strong. It has to be mutual, and that's kind of what I was getting the preview of really early on. If I'm always the strong one and the one who's like meeting your needs, we don't have an even relationship. We have to both say, here's what I need, okay, what do you need? And
yeah,
then we can actually really be in a real relationship together. We can meet each other's needs and feel really good about it.
yeah. So, okay, so help me, Carrie. Am I? For those of us who maybe didn't have our birthright fully affirmed, the birthright to need, and asking for a friend, she happens to be 55. What would you say to her?
Well, in our training, what it was called was re-imprinting, really.
Mm,
And so, there's some excellent work out there you can do with a coach or a therapist around it, really identifying that. And like, so what we do is re-imprinting, and it's all about recognizing those old beliefs and starting to replace them with new and healthier ones. And it doesn't sound possible, but until like you've actually been in that place, it's powerful. It's what we call change work.
Yeah,
And I
love
think the
it.
greatest aha for me in this work, both as client and coach, is, and you know, having worked with therapists too, is that actually it doesn't take as long as you think it is. Like what takes
Mhm.
long is really starting to be in relationship with yourself and having rapport with yourself and the person you're working with. The change actually can happen really quickly, which is so cool. So instead of thinking I have to do it all, we can actually, you know, work on our like the way our brain works with ourselves, and like getting in touch with our body and recognizing when your body's giving you signals of like, hey, you might need something right now. We can actually get into a place of reminding ourselves like, oh, it's safe to ask for help. My needs matter. So like one of the first steps is just becoming aware of when you're avoiding asking for help or feeling guilty about having needs or feeling crunchy, or like in my case I remember just feeling like like you know, self-critic being like you're weak, right?
Mm.
So learning to recognize like there's that old voice that tells me that, but I know it's not true. So I'm going to do something small. I'm going to ask for support in just one area of my life where it feels a little safer. I'm going to practice asking for a ride, even if I don't need one. Like, or I'm going to practice saying, "Do you have a few minutes? I really need just someone to listen right now." I think that you know this a lot about me. People will say when we're going through some major trauma with Griffin, they're like, "What can I do? What can I do?" And I like don't have the bandwidth to come up with anything. But like it was so hard for me to finally say to people, "I just need you to listen. I just
Mm.
need to talk about it." And
Yeah.
I don't need you to fix anything. I don't need you to bring me dinner. Like,
Yeah.
I just need you to listen. That was so hard for me
Oh, sure.
because then
Yeah.
I felt like I had to come up with something for them to do that was going to make them feel good. But I really didn't need it, you know? So it's
Yeah.
just interesting. So I think it's recognize it, just start to notice. That's probably the biggest window into shifting it, is start to notice what your brain is doing and like, you know, let yourself be amused by it or just aware of it. And then try a really small step. I need to ask for something right now. Who's the safest person to ask? And go
Mm.
do it.
I mean, the word you keep saying is practice, and that just really strikes me because I think that's just it, right? Like, um, and when you talk about the change work, right? It's like once you're ready, the change work happens relatively quickly. It's the acknowledging and getting through the feelings of like, oh crap, I need to ask for what I need, and working through that. And then when you're ready to get there, it can happen really quickly, but it's still a work in progress. Like anything, if as someone who helps everyone, when I ask for help and I get it, great. That reinforces like I am allowed to need. And when I ask for what I need and I don't get it, it sets me back a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so nothing is ever, you're never fixed. We've said this before, we'll say it again. Um, so don't it, when you I have to remind myself when I go backwards a little bit, that's okay. I've come so
Mm-hmm.
far. I'm going to continue to go far. Um, but even in this conversation, clearly I've already come up with a little bit like, oh shit, I do this still and I do this still. And that's okay because in that I do this still, I'm still doing the thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, it's just, I'm having all these light bulbs when you say that. Like, one is human design really plays into this, and it would
Yeah.
be cool to do like a little live interview with Amy about this the week this comes out, because I was just thinking about this. Whether you follow human design or there's some other guide that really helps you understand how you work in the world, it really is all about needs. Like, what do I
Yeah.
need? I need to protect myself and ground myself because everybody's energy is coming at me, and I can read, like, if I'm listening to my intuition, I can read people whether they want me to or not. So I need to actually protect that energy. And then the other thing I need to do is trust that the right things are going to come towards me and not
Yeah.
like try to make things happen. You need to be understood. You need to be able to like make your wishes known, and you need people to fucking respect it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, you need to be able to have people around you can trust so you can instigate things. Like, so
Yes.
I think this is
True.
really fascinating. So if we could start there, it's really empowering to be like, okay, the way I work is, otherwise it's overwhelming. It's like, I don't want to sit in vulnerability all day and think about my needs and then feel sad if they don't get met.
Right.
I
Right.
I need to, as I go along, go, what do you need? Like, my hand on
Yeah.
my heart. What do you need right
Mm.
now? Because to your point earlier, I often, and we could another episode bring in someone to talk about shadow work. Like that's my shadow
Mm.
side, is needing something and then feeling really shitty when I do need something, and then feeling like I do it wrong when I ask for it. And then blaming myself about the way I went about it, right? Like this whole cycle of bullshit that like the
Yep.
younger version of me has, like, feeling like a burden or anything like that, that shit comes up all the time. It's going to happen because I'm not going to completely divorce myself of my younger, sweet soulful self. I need to like parent that part of me and be like, oh, okay, I hear you. You seem really worked up about this, or you seem really nervous, or you feel like you're not, you do matter. What do you need? Right. And like with the help of human design, like, okay, what do you know you need? I know for sure I need to ground because I've got way too many open centers. And so
Mm.
I gotta get like my footing before I get into someone else's business here, or else I'll just become them in this moment. And that's
Yeah.
how, like, that conditioning is how I lost myself so much. So yeah.
You just said a word that makes me want to reflect back to what we said at the beginning, which is, while this is something that we learn very early as a child, our parents are doing the best they can. And so you just use the word burden, and you know that that is a word Charlotte has been using lately about herself.
Right. Well, I
And
relate to it. So yes.
but it's interesting because when she said that to me, I there was part of me that understood exactly what she was talking about. She was talking about how she doesn't drive, and so even when she comes home, I mean, when she needs to come home, we have to go pick her up. We have to take her back. When she's here, she's, because we don't really, she, as if you've listened to her episode, so public transportation's not awesome for her. So we're always driving her where she needs to be because she doesn't know how to drive. And so it's somewhat a story she tells herself, but at some point we've made her feel that way. And I get it, And so I want to reflect back. If you're sitting and listening to this and thinking to yourself, God damn my parents, or God damn my mom, Darren and I have made Charlotte feel that way. She also has an impaired birthright to need. And we're doing the best we can. So, give your parents some grace.
Well, and to your point, like I remember when I went through training, we were on live calls with
Mm,
Stacey, and if you would ever go back and find that recording, you hear me raise my hand and go, listening to you, like I'm feeling like I've completely fucked it up with my kids. And she's like, we have, and we're supposed to. Our parents fucked us up the way we were meant to come into this world and learn, and you're gonna do that version for your kids. And what we also know is like we don't, like, our parents want us to have their eyes or their stubbornness. They don't want us to have their insecurities, but we get it all because
yeah,
we're like generous hearted children who just automatically take on their examples, not just what they're saying. Damn it. We want them to like be better. We want them to evolve. But they're also gonna, so of course it makes sense. My oldest constantly, if all three of my kids constantly are like, tiptoeing, asking for things. And I'm like, oh, we obviously modeled that, both Brendan and
right,
I, like,
right.
or like we want them to be self-reliant and confident because we know that's where confidence comes from. We don't want them to feel bad asking though. And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
yeah, that, I mean, that's just all about, that's how all this evolves. But you and I actually learning about this, talking about it, disrupting it, makes it so much better for them and their kids if they
yeah.
have any.
Yeah, I'll never forget Stacey being on stage and being like, I don't think she used these words, although she meant it. It's like we've all fucked up our kids, and our kids are gonna fuck up their kids, and on and on and on and on. Like
These are the
it's just
lessons we're here to learn.
exactly. I love it, love it, love it. All right, so today we've really focused on the birthright to need and how it plays such a crucial role in our sense of self. Clearly, we've both worked on this.
We're
Clearly,
working on it.
we're still working on it. Not over in any
Stay
way, shape, or
tuned.
form. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um,
I'm having a light bulb about the next retreat too, like needs.
oh, okay.
Anyway, yeah.
Ooh, all right. But as you said at the beginning, is there five or there's six birthrights? I can't remember.
I feel like there's five.
I want to say
I I
five
I
too.
I, I actually was talking about them, and then did I actually one, two, three? Yeah, five.
Five, that's
Yeah.
what I thought. So we will do different episodes about each one of these because, I think it's like, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's sort of like anything. We all have a little bit of all of it in us. All of our birthrights at some point have been impaired. It's just to what extent. And I do remember this with the training. It was like every single person, whether it was client or student or whatever, could be like, this is mine. So there's like anything, we all have some of it in us, all of them, but there's one that usually stands out as glaringly true. And definitely for me, it is birthright to need. So I'm so
Mm,
glad we talked about this, and I am so glad I got through it without crying because I was pretty
yeah.
sure I might.
I really feel like bringing Amy back to talk about this birthright in terms of human design is essential because
Yeah,
every reading I've ever had with her or anyone else always is like, when you figure out how to put your needs first, everything's going to work out for you. And,
which is
stay
true.
tuned. Work in progress.
Always. But it is also what we talk about at the retreat. Like
Yeah.
when, again, you making the selfless woman, like who wants to be that? You know,
Nobody.
if we are taking care of ourselves first, we have the bandwidth to take care of others in a better, more joyful, more resourced way. So
Oh,
yeah, I love the idea of
yeah.
bringing it back.
And for everyone listening, we want to leave you with this. And again, this is what we're actively working on. So we invite you to do the same. It's not just okay to have needs. It is necessary. That's what makes you human. We would be robots if we had no needs. So this week, I would invite everybody, including us, notice where you're holding back from expressing your needs. I'm going to say it
Mm,
again. Notice where you're holding back from expressing your needs and see what happens if you allow yourself to ask for help, even in the smallest way.
I love that. Well, we decided to end with In Excess Need You Tonight because that's got the word need in it. And we both love In Excess and we both have a lot of feelings about Michael Hutchence and so
Yes.
forth. So I'm just I was looking at the lyrics because it's, you know, a little more sexual. It doesn't totally land, but these do. So how do you feel?
Hey, sexual needs are important too.
Oh, 100% Say that one
practice
again.
practice there. Sexual needs are very important.
Absolutely. All right. So it says, how do you feel? I'm lonely. What do you think? Can't think at all. What you gonna do? Gonna live my life. So slide over here and give me a moment. Your moves are so raw. I've got to let you know. I've got to let you know you're one of my kind.
Mm,
I love them.
me too.
All right. Well, another episode in the books. We're getting so close to being done with season two, which is very exciting. But stay tuned because we have a lot more, many more episodes still to drop. And I know what our list looks like. I know what our list looks like of episodes for next year. And it's just going to keep getting juicier and juicier. So, as always, we're so grateful that you listen. And if this landed for you, please share it with somebody because as Kari said, I guarantee you know somebody whose impaired birthright is to need.
Absolutely. And I just want to add, since today is the first day we've been recording in a while, I needed this.
Oh my God, I had no idea. I woke up this morning and I was like, "Ooh, I can't wait to record the pod." And then you and I both had some shit go down, and we got on and we were both kind of like, meh. And then you even like texted like,
Yes.
"We could probably do one." And immediately, you know, even though we are not together, seeing your face come on the screen, I was like, "Fuck all, I needed this." So
Mm,
yes, absolutely. So I'm
yes.
glad we met our needs.
Me too.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.